Hello, my name is Alicia, and welcome to my Unnoticed Evil channel where I talk about the hidden evils in culture. And today I'm going to be talking about the evildoer's self-delusion bubble. Now, when we think of evil, we may think of those classic villains in stories. They know that they're doing evil, and sometimes they take pride in doing evil. But in the real world, evil often denies that it is evil. A lot of people who do bad things still see themselves as being good. The evildoer's self-delusion bubble allows evildoers to give into their desires to do evil without a guilty conscience. This is a bubble of delusion that evildoers create for themselves that continually tells them a lie that they are regular, okay people. This delusion bubble allows the evildoer, essentially, to look into the mirror and see an angel instead of a devil. To build and maintain this delusion bubble, the evildoer has a large selection of techniques and tactics at his or her disposal. One technique is denial that their intentions are bad. After it has been confirmed that the evildoer has done a bad deed that has caused harm to others, you may hear them explain that they had no idea that such harm would ensue. They may be telling the truth. They may really not have known, but there is a catch. They did not know that harm would ensue because they basically don't care. Evildoers generally place little to no consideration to the effects of their behavior on others. Therefore, they will not be as knowledgeable about something that they don't care about to begin with. Hence the expression, I did not realize I would cause so much pain. So in these particular contexts, questions to ask would be, would these people have known by common sense or common decency that harm would ensue from their actions? If the answer is yes, then that would be reason to be suspicious. Now, other methods evildoers use to convince themselves they're good people are simply perverting the definition of right and wrong. As I discussed in a previous video, when right and wrong become subjective, evil flourishes. It essentially creates an environment where no matter how destructive behavior is, there will always be some excuse to call it right. Now, another technique is evildoers may just deny that they caused harm. Even when people around them are suffering because of them, they may say to themselves that people are just suffering because they're human. And don't all humans suffer? Suffering is just a part of life, so why blame suffering on one person? Now, this may not always work, but sometimes there is a delay, a time delay, between the time the wicked deed takes place and the time the harm takes effect. For example, let's talk about secondhand smoke. Secondhand smoke can lead to cancer and macular degeneration. Yet, there is a time delay between when the person is exposed to secondhand smoke and when the harm takes noticeable effect. In addition, many factors can contribute to the onset of these very same illnesses, so it is easy for the evildoer to deny that their smoking cigarette habit had any effect on the other person or had any part in the illness that the person has suffered from. Now, even when harmful effects are not delayed, they can still be hidden or obscured. For example, the effects of mental abuse. Now, sometimes people do try to stand up to the evildoer and call them out on their actions, but the self-delusion bubble can still prevail. There are many ways that the evildoer can invalidate the whistleblower's testimony. One example, if the whistleblower is too hysterical or upset, the evildoer can just say, well, you're in a bad mood. You're probably not thinking straight. You need to calm down. Of course, telling the person to calm down may make them get more upset, and the evildoer certainly doesn't mind that. Of course, on the other hand, if you're too calm, they might figure, well, you don't sound too upset. Maybe it's not a big deal. Now, if the person standing up to the evildoer happens to be a friend or family member, the evildoer may claim, well, maybe you may have some problem with your mental health. And the evildoer may express concern for this person's state of mental health. Essentially, these tactics make it more difficult for the whistleblower to be taken seriously. Now, there are other ways of invalidating the whistleblower's testimony, such as calling the testimony a character assassination, or saying that the other person is being cynical, or making the whistleblower out to be a bad guy who is out to get them. See, when you stand up to a wicked person and try to call them out on their actions, they may not see reality. They may see you as a big monster of unspeakable horror, while they are the little knight trying to defend himself, hoping to survive the encounter. They don't see things as they are. Now, still another way of invalidating the other person's testimony is by presenting their concern as a simple pet peeve or an idiosyncratic preference. For example, let us say that Jerry is an inconsiderate person and likes to smoke in his apartment, but his cigarette smoke leaks into his neighbor's apartment. His neighbor complains, but Jerry tells himself this neighbor is just being fussy. He's got a pet peeve against cigarette smoke. Well, in reality, cigarette smoke has been labeled as a health hazard and has been banned from public buildings. So it's more than just an annoyance. Now, evildoers are often disrespectful people. But they don't always feel bad disrespecting another person. They can justify this disrespect for the other person by labeling the other person as simply being unworthy of respect or hard to respect. For example, let us say that Nancy is showing disrespect for her brother Craig and doesn't even listen to Craig when he's talking. Nancy tells herself Craig is simply hard to respect. He's been unemployed for the past few years. He has a stutter. He's not really that smart. Of course, if Nancy feels Craig is unworthy of respect, she can just respect Craig as much as she wants and not feel bad. When Craig complains and Nancy does not listen, Nancy exclaims, "Oh yes, Craig. He gets so annoyed when people don't listen to him. Bless his heart, he just wants people to listen to him." But you see that listening to somebody when they're talking is not just a preference, it is common decency. Now, another major issue is imperfections and shades of gray. Sometimes evildoers like to blur the line between being imperfect and just being a bad person. Sometimes they may remove this dividing line entirely. They will not see their bad behaviors as evidence that they're a bad person, but rather as imperfections. They may deny that there are any good people or bad people, figuring nobody is completely good or completely bad. But in reality, some people consistently make an honest attempt to do what is right, and some do not, and would rather do whatever they want regardless of what harm comes upon others. Some people may figure that as long as they've never robbed a bank, killed a guy, molested a child, committed acts of terrorism, they're generally good. Meanwhile, these very same people may do acts of evil on a regular basis, such as harassment, microaggressions, slander, sabotage, or deceptive schemes. These behaviors also are evil, but they do not lead to prison time. Now, another excuse to do evil is just being alive. For those of you who have seen the TV series 13 Reasons Why, you may be familiar with the character Ani, who had mentioned upon entering the series that if you are living and breathing, then you are a liar. Now, of course, as the TV series progresses, Ani frames someone for murder, allowing the actual murderer to go free. Ani also tells her mother that she is a member of several clubs at school that don't exist. And she writes Clay's college admissions essay for him, turning it in without even telling him about it. Now, did Ani do all these wicked, deceptive schemes simply because she is alive and breathing? I don't think so. Now, we all have told a lie at some point. That does not mean we continue to tell a bunch of lies until the day that we die. Now, another technique evildoers use to convince themselves they're okay is what is called assumed similarity bias. Assumed similarity bias is a psychological phenomenon characterized by the tendency for individuals to overestimate the extent to which other people's thoughts, beliefs, values, characteristics, and behaviors are similar to their own. Evildoers sometimes like to assume that their wicked behaviors are more common than they are, giving them the illusion that their behaviors are the norm and therefore must not be that bad. When you try to stand up to them, they may say, "Well, you would have done the same thing," or, "Hey, everyone was like me, so get used to it." In reality, wicked behaviors are just as wicked when they're common as when they're not common, and they are still just as harmful. Now, television creates a breeding ground for the self-delusion bubble. Television normalizes and promotes many wicked behaviors listed here: sexual harassment and sexual molestation, sexual promiscuity, breaking into someone's house, disobedience to authority figures, habitual lying, laughing at people being mean to each other, being entertained by fighting and turmoil, also known as scandals, and of course apologizing for doing the right thing. Meanwhile, good behaviors that television condemns sometimes are telling the truth, being too nice, and maintaining one's chastity. This list shows that you can be a pretty rotten person, and yet in the land of television be considered normal. In the land of television, if you sexually harass women, nobody bats an eye. In the land of television, no matter how mean you are to your friend is supposed to always forgive you, and continue being your friend. When people are fighting and are being mean to each other, you are permitted to laugh and be entertained. It is okay to lie to your friends and family members all the time. They may not like it, but they will get over it. If you are male, you can view women as mere sexual entertainment. In fact, you're supposed to view women that way because you are a guy. Note, however, that many television producers are bad men, and some former child actors have testified that in the film industry there are pedophiles everywhere. Now, sometimes when people try to confront evildoers for their wicked actions, they like to manipulate the conversation. And so when you try to confront an evildoer for their bad deeds and their self-delusion bubble is at work, you may find yourself just running up against a brick wall. First, the person may intentionally misunderstand what you are saying. You may find you have to keep repeating yourself. Sometimes the person may just assume you're joking, even if there's no reason to believe that you are joking. Now, when it comes to deflecting the conversation, changing the subject is often what comes to mind, but there are other ways of deflecting a conversation. Examples include sarcasm, flattery, and humor. Humor in particular can be effective because it makes the conversation seem less serious, and a seemingly less serious conversation makes the wicked deeds seem like they're not a big deal. Now, sarcasm combined with humor especially can give an extra sting of disrespect. You may hear them say, "Oh, you got me there," or "guilty as charged." Finally, evildoers have networks, and within these networks they defend each other's bad behaviors. So, to summarize, bursting the evildoer's self-delusion bubble can be very hard. An honest talk may not do much. They may even think that being thick-skinned is a virtue to be admired. However, when people speak up in large numbers, the evildoer's self-delusion bubble will be harder to maintain.